What's happening? Welcome in, Jason Priester, Clemson Insider. Back with you as I am every Monday, 7 p.m. Bank on it. We'll be here. Bye week. Don't you just love them? I know fans love the bye weeks. Love them. Us in the media kind of view those things differently, man. It's nice to get a break. It's nice to be able to sit home on a Saturday and watch all the other games. You don't get to do a whole lot of that during the season on days that Clemson's playing. It just takes up a whole lot of time. There's just not a lot of time to watch all the other games. So it's good to be able to sit home on a Saturday, watch some games I wouldn't otherwise been able to. Now comes the stretch run for Clemson, though. This is, coming into the season, it looked like the first half of the schedule was kind of going to be the most difficult part. Now that we're inside the season and across the halfway point, it's the back half of the schedule that's actually the toughest part. Florida State, North Carolina State, even App State to a degree, not living up to expectations. Florida State's downright bad. North Carolina State's downright bad. Two teams that, were supposed to compete for the ACC title. Instead, we've got SMU, Pitt, kind of surprises in the ACC, still unbeaten in ACC play. Pitt still unbeaten, period. And SMU's only loss was a close loss to BYU, who is inside the top 10. 4 unbeaten teams, 2 spots in Charlotte. One of those teams are going to go down this weekend. SMU and Pitt play one another. Clemson gets Louisville at home. Big test for that Clemson defense. Big test. That is a really good Louisville offense. Top 20 score and top 10 passing. So that West Goldman Jr. is going to have to be on point. Probably their biggest test since Georgia, to be quite honest. Coming off a bye week, Clemson should be as healthy as they've been in quite some time. I still, say Bryant Westco probably could have played against Virginia if they really needed him to. Watching him walk around on the sideline, he didn't even have a limp or anything. I feel fairly confident, unless he's had some type of setback, that you'll see him Saturday. Not so sure about Tyler Brown. He's still he's coming off that top rope surgery. Sometimes it takes a couple, 3 weeks. We'll see. And that's on the best case scenario. I'll be surprised if he's back this quick. Last time we saw him there in Virginia, he was having to use a scooter to get around, putting no weight on that foot. So not sure I'd expect him to be back. But other than that, I think pretty much everybody's healthy, going to be ready to go, unless somebody got hurt in practice that we have not heard about yet. Again, though, this going to be a big test. I know Clemson's 11-point favorites. Clemson at least gets them at home. Heck, Louisville's never even beaten Clemson. But I still think this is going to be a pretty good test of this defense. A defense that I think is much better than the stats would indicate. Particularly if you're looking at scoring defense and rushing defense. I do think first 3-4 games, Clemson's defense kind of struggled setting the edge, and they were kind of susceptible to some of the outside runs, particularly from more athletic quarterbacks. We saw it in the Stanford game. Since Peter Woods has been back, though, they've gotten that stuff cleaned up. I thought they were much better against Wake, much better against Virginia, at setting the edge and kind of shutting that stuff down on the outside. Really, outside of that one run by the Virginia quarterback, they kind of shut all that stuff down. Heck, he had -7 rushing yards. And I know sacks figured into that, but still, that's not a bad number to hold a athletic quarterback to, who's known to, or a quarterback that's been known to create some problems with his legs. Got to do it again this week, though. And this is a Louisville team that'll beat you down the field. On the flip side of that, their defense just isn't very good, man. Look, not very good at all, man. It gives up chunk play after chunk play, tons of points. So you would hope that this Clemson offense would be able to keep the momentum that it's developed over the first few weeks and keep it rolling. Nonetheless, kicks off a big month for this Clemson team because after that you got to go to Virginia Tech, then you got to go to Pitt. You come back home against Citadel, and then you finish it off at home against South Carolina. So there are some potential pitfalls for this team. It's got to just, you have to take it 1 week at a time and see how things play out. From what I've seen since the Georgia game, I absolutely think this team's capable of winning out. Don't mean they will, but I think they're capable of doing it. But that's why they play the games. A man says it's going to be a big November for Clemson football. Hey, we heard multiple players talking about it last week, November to remember. Nick Eason was talking about having to finish. We've heard Dabo Swinney talking about this team needing to finish many times. They were kind of in a similar spot a couple of years ago, 2022. They started out 8-0. Everything's in front of them. Looks like maybe they're going to make a march to the playoff, and then they go up to their South Bend and just get smacked. Come back home and win a couple games after that. I don't remember if both were at home, but then they end up losing to South Carolina to snap the long home winning streak and all that good stuff, knocked them totally out of the playoff race. Then after beating North Carolina in the ACC championship game, moved the ball up and down the field against Tennessee, but can't make anything of it and get smoked in the Orange Bowl. So hopefully you don't have a repeat performance here. I do think this team is playing with a lot more confidence than that team was in 2022. Despite them being 8-0, there have been some inconsistencies and struggles on the offensive side of the ball. The defense had really carried them for much of the season. You're working with a whole different set of circumstances on the offensive side of the ball this year, and I think this team's in a different spot from a mental standpoint. I just think they're mentally tougher. Hopefully the defense plays a full game on Saturday. I know the backups were largely responsible for all the points at the end of the game against Virginia, but I think they also tend to take plays off. I don't want to go as far as saying they're taking plays off because then you're starting to question guys' effort. And I don't like to do that unless it's absolutely obvious. But it was 41-10 going into fourth quarter against Virginia. And that's when Clemson really started, rolling in some of the backups. And as you got deeper into the fourth quarter, they started going deeper into the bench. I'll just say, if indeed this ends up being a four quarter game and you can't do a lot of subbing like they've been able to do in the last few games, I'm kind of anxious to see this defense, go out and have to play 4 quarters and see what they can do. Because I think they're catching a lot of flack that they haven't earned. Again, I do think they struggled some with the run defense, particularly with getting the edge set and stuff earlier in the season. But I think a lot of that's been cleaned up over the past 2-3 weeks maybe. We'll see if they can continue to keep it cleaned up. Yeah, this is kind of the point I was trying to make. They don't have to lean on that defense week in and week out because the offense is struggling to put points on the board. It's kind of been on the other way around. You got an offense that's so efficient, so productive that the defense, the margin for error isn't nearly as slim. You got an offense that's capable of bailing out your defense if the need arises. To me, it's an entirely different set of circumstances when you compare it to the 2022 team. If I was making it sound like I was comparing the two teams, that's not what I meant to do. Just, that the situations were similar. Really hope we snag Jordan Young with Harris. Yeah, that would give you two of the better safeties in the class. That would be a pretty good haul there. And you know, I get it. Clemson's short on commitments in the 2025 class, especially after the 3D commitments. But unless you see a bunch of guys leave en masse via the portal, I don't think you're going to see a lot of attrition. You know, there's not a bunch of guys set to come off scholarship. Class was always going to be small. Make no mistake, the plan wasn't for it to be this small, but it was always going to be on the smaller side. If you can get Jordan Young to go with Tay Harris, that gives you two very athletic safeties, both with legit speed. Tay Harris is a speedster, man. He can move. I've watched him play in person. I haven't watched Young play in person, so I don't know if he's as fast as Harris is. And even if he's not, it's not a knock on him. Not many people are. But you know, he's got legit speed too, and that would absolutely give you two probably a. I know Tay's ranked firmly inside the top 10 among all safeties. I think the services are a little more divided on Young. At least one's got him in the top 10 or at number 10 or something. But you know, if you're ranked as one of the 10 best players at your position, the chances are your potential's pretty high. But we'll see we'll see. You know, it's kind of been a Clemson NC State battle for a while. You know, if you go back to the spring, maybe even earlier than that in the year, and you know, it just sounds like it's just a matter of when, not if, with Jordan Young and Clemson. And then as you get into the summer, maybe not so much. You know, all the momentum shifts to North Carolina State. He's been there a bunch of times. He's been to Clemson twice this season. He was here for Virginia. He was here for the game against North Carolina State, so he got to see Clemson smack them around. He has been to North Carolina State since. Went to Michigan this weekend. I wouldn't. I don't think Michigan's going to be a legit contender. Still think it's Clemson, North Carolina State, and you know, he announces on Saturday, so we'll see. You know, the momentum's swung back and forth a couple of times in this one. I do know that, you know, after talking with somebody right after the Virginia weekend up there, they felt pretty good about their chances. You know, that was over. That's been a week ago. Today. We could go today, and know how things are in the recruiting world these days. I don't have any names to give you on 2025 quarterbacks. My theory is that they'll take a run at somebody that's already committed, and that'll, you probably won't hear about it very much. You won't hear very much about it because there's just not many or really any viable options that are left that are not committed yet. So if you want to take a high school kid, you're probably going to have to flip somebody. There's one right here in this state. Will Wilson plays there at Richland Northeast. I've watched him play live. Dude is for real, man. He's severely underrated by the services. He's committed to North Carolina State. I've seen some chatter online about Bryce Baker. He's committed to North Carolina. Has been since the summer of 23. So he's been committed for a while. If for whatever reason Mac Brown isn't back for next year, and maybe that changes things. Maybe that creates an opportunity for you to slide in there and try and flip him. But those are definitely two names I would keep an eye on. But I could already hear it now. If it's Will Wilson, how Clemson had to settle for this fallback option. I'm telling you, that dude is severely underrated. I would not, me personally, I don't see I don't see much of a trade-off between Hebert and Wilson. I think Wilson's upside's that high. And he's a true he is a true dual threat guy. He can create some problems with his legs, and wouldn't say he's got the, a cannon for an arm, but he's got plenty of arm strength, and he can put it where he needs to. Not as worried about this game as I am the next 2 weeks. Virginia Tech and Pitt back-to-back on the road is going to be tough. Virginia Tech's won 3 in a row now, if I'm not mistaken, and I think all 3 of them were blowout wins. So they might be putting something together there. But for me, it's that Pitt game. That I'm with you there. I would be worried a little bit more about Pitt than I would be Louisville or Virginia Tech. Not saying those teams aren't capable of beating Clemson. Certainly are if Clemson screws around and doesn't play well. But that Pitt team's had some good fortune so far this year. They've got, they've kind of eked out a couple of wins. They probably should have a couple of L's on their record already, but they were able to overcome a 10-point deficit in the last couple of minutes. I forget who it was against earlier in the season. They squeaked out a win 17-15 over Cal, who's not very good. I will say this, man, that, when you're talking about a Pat Narduzzi team, it's going to be a well-coached defense. Those DBs they've got, they're really good. Go back and watch some of that game against Syracuse the other night. That wasn't all Kyle McCord just making terrible decisions. Those guys made some plays. They were winning 31. I think it was 31-6. Midway through the third quarter, they had 85 yards of total offense. They had a couple of pick six or 3 pick sixes, was it? And before it was all over, Syracuse had thrown 5 interceptions. Gee, that is a ball hawking secondary they've got up there. Am I doing okay? Yeah. I didn't get much sleep last night. I mean, maybe that's what you're seeing. Yeah, I did not sleep well. I did not get much sleep at all last night. Other than that, though, I feel all right. Appreciate you asking. D is better with Woods playing in. Wish they had took a defensive end from the portal. No depth behind Lawson. Yeah, I said it. I've said it many times. If it were me, I would have preferred to see him grab an end out of the portal too. Peter Woods is fine out there at defensive end. Don't misunderstand, but he's probably at his best on the interior. He can do what you need him to do out there at end for the most part. But you also saw what'll happen if he gets hurt. Denoff was not very good. That was a big part of, in my opinion, a big part of Clemson's struggle to set the edge for those few weeks. Missing Woods and having to rely on Denoff and the inexperience of Lawson, although I thought he got better and better the more he played. But he's more of a pass rush specialist right now, more so than every down end. But yeah, there's just not much experience behind Woods. You got those two guys and A.J. Hoffler. For me, it would have been ideal to go grab a graduate transfer out of the portal, have a guy you could have it in for a year to kind of bridge that gap between those younger guys we just talked about, Lawson and Hoffler. Even Denoff, because I shouldn't say he's not a younger guy, but he doesn't have a ton of experience. And then they got a good one coming in this class in Wofford, who took a big hit, and was it 24/7 that just updated their ratings recently, and Wofford took a big hit for whatever reason. That dude's long, he's athletic, he's got a quick first step. I think he's going to be a really good end for Clemson. But yeah, For me, ideally, you would have gone to the portal and taken it in, but that's neither here nor there at this point. You got who you got. Think the Louisville game will come down to the defense, and if the offense continues to play well, will determine the outcome. Yeah, for sure. Again, that Louisville defense is it's kind of like I say about South Carolina's offense. It ain't scaring nobody. Um, they give up a lot of big plays. They give up points, and they give up a bunch of points. And, if your defense doesn't play well, then it can turn into a track meet. I I think this is going to be a game. It's Monday now. I reserve the right to change my mind between now and Thursday night or Thursday afternoon whenever I write my prediction story. But I think Clemson's defense is going to be fine against this offense. And I think Clemson's offense is, let's just say I think Clemson's going to cover spread. I think they're going to win by double digits. Clemson fixing to start snapping necks and cashing checks. I'm tired of the continued disrespect from the experts. Yeah, I'm not one that waves the disrespect flag very often, but I did find it a little confusing that Clemson dropped 2 spots in the AP yesterday, not even having played a game this week. You want A&M to jump them, fine, I get it. But BYU, come on, man. Look at BYU's schedule and tell me what they had done that deserves them, jumping that much. They beat Southern Illinois. They did beat SMU. But then they beat Wyoming, Kansas State, Baylor, Arizona, and Oklahoma State and UCF. I mean, their win over UCF vaulted them up into the top 10 and ahead of Clemson. That one I did not understand. So, if you want to cry some disrespect from the pollsters this week, I'll listen because I didn't understand that one at all. $20.25 D-line class is legit. Yeah, and it would have been much better with Bryce Davis and as Isaiah Campbell. Jeez, particularly Davis. That was, and don't get me. I think Campbell's going to be a really good player too. But I say that about Davis because he was a defensive end. But yeah, I like what they have. Amari Adams, the Watford kid. The one that just committed, the Williams Lee kid. I think he's another guy that's a little underrated by the services. Man, he's had a monster season. He has just absolutely dominated this year. It'd have been nice to see him being able to hold on to Bryce Davis, though. He'd have added that much more to this class just because of the position he plays and how good he is. But don't get me wrong, Wofford's a really good one too. Fun time Friday night at South Florence. Do you think Clemson get both the wide receivers, the one from the Midlands and no? I don't think they take both. If Clemson takes another receiver, it's only going to be one. They're not going to take 2 more. Because if you actually look at the roster, there's nobody that's graduated. that's set to come off scholarship after the season, do think they will lose one or two to the portal, and that's why you're seeing them trying to take an extra in this class. But no, he's talking about Donovan Murph and Lennox Valerie there at South Lawrence. I don't even know for 100% certainty that if they miss on Murph, they'll take another one, period. Do know that Valerie has done enough this year to put himself on the radar. Virginia exposed our defense, that they were not ready for the snap of the ball. They take too long to get their defense called into them and get set. Again, it was 41-10 going into the fourth quarter when Clemson started putting all the backups in, and that plays a part into that thing too. Not having a lot of experienced guys on the field during that fourth quarter. I think more is being made of that than it should be. I think Clemson needs defensive ends. Everybody needs defensive ends. No, I'm just kidding. It would have definitely, if they could have kept Bryce Davis, that would have just, made this class so much better, even though that it's on the smaller side. And right now they've only got the one, the Wofford kid. I don't know that they're going to take another one. We'll see, but that's another position where you don't have anybody scheduled to come off scholarship. So you're always going to take one, maybe two, if you can find the right guy. But yeah, it's a position I'd like to see them take somebody in the portal just to kind of bridge that gap, to those younger guys. Because I think Hoffler is going to end up being a really good player. I think we'll see where Lawson ends up. He has made a lot of progress in the time he's been on campus, but he's still got some improvement to do in run defense. His pass, he's pretty productive as a pass rusher, but he's still got some things to shore up with the run defense. Tennessee just coming in and offering these targets a lot more money. Seems like they beat us in multiple recruits, which didn't used to be the case. That's part of it. Part of that is they've now got a coaching staff in place that's got a lot of really good recruiters on it too. For a long time, couldn't say that about Tennessee, but yeah, they got some money to throw around. Absolutely plays a big part in it. Anyway, Venables isn't retained at OU. He just got extended, and his buyouts, it ain't small. We'll see if Oklahoma's willing to pay that after the season. I don't know if they are or not, but his seat gets hotter with each passing week because they're not going to stand for that at Oklahoma. Especially with what they're seeing from that offense, and I get it, man. They've been ravaged by injury on the offensive side of the ball, but at the end of the day, it's all about results, and I don't think that he is getting the kind of results that the big money boosters and the administration and et cetera were expecting when he was hired. We'll see if he gets another year. It might depend on how the rest of this season plays out because, again, he's got a pretty steep buyout. Not that they couldn't afford it if they really wanted to, but no school is like writing those kind of checks. But if it gets bad enough, you might be in a position where you don't have a choice. Really looking forward to next Monday. Basketball is back. Tourney team, you think? Yes, I think it's a tournament team. Absolutely. I get it. You lost PJ Hall, but I think Brownell kind of killed it in the portal, adding the Victor Lake and Lock and however you say his name, bringing on the Reeves kid from Duke. Although he's going to play in a reserve role, Brownell said back at the tip off that if they could get 10 minutes a game out of him, they'd be thrilled because he struggled with ankle injuries. Big 7'2" kid. And they also finally get Jake Hodbrother, the kid that redshirted last year, transferred in from Air Force, I think it was, before last season. Long, lanky shooting guard, 6'5", 6'6" guard, gives them, more length than they had out there last year. You put him in that backcourt with Chase Hunter, Dylan Hunter, some of those other guys, and of course you get Shefflin back. You got Miles Foster who transferred in. See what kind of step Chauncey Wiggins takes in his development. But yeah, I think this is a tournament team, man. I think this Clemson team can be pretty dang good this year. I don't know if AJ Brand's an option or not. He's committed to Virginia Tech. I got to watch him play once last year too, but it's hard to say who is an option and who's not. And you just basically kind of mostly saying guys I think are worth keeping an eye on, man. I guess Brand's worth a guy, at least keeping one eye on. I think he's only got 3 or 4 power four offers. He's committed to Virginia Tech. I know South Carolina offered him. I think Oregon State offered him. I can't remember if anybody else did. That was a power team. But I think let's just say if he is an option, I think he's lower down on the board. I think those other guys I talked about earlier would be higher. And there might even be a guy or two that I hadn't mentioned that's worth, just keeping an eye on. Personally felt like Hebert was below Clemson's usual standard at QB. Well, I don't know because I've just not seen enough of him. I don't know unless you're out there watching him every week. I don't know. There's no junior film on him, so there's nothing to gauge his talent. There's very little senior film. So, I mean, I don't know how – I'm not just speaking to you directly, but I don't know how somebody that doesn't watch him week in and week out can really get a good gauge of exactly what he is. I know he killed it at camp that summer that he came here, but again, like I've said many times, that's competing against air. There was something Garrett Riley saw in him and he liked, at least back then. Hearing Riley's name connected with ECU. Oh, I don't have any thoughts on that because I think, my opinion, he makes more Clemson than what ECU's been paying their head coaches. And these days, you better be careful. If you're a coordinator, you got to be extremely careful about the first head coaching job you take. Kind of, look at what happened with, let's use Jeff Scott as an example. Look what happened with him down there in South Florida. That nobody else is beating down his door for a head coaching job. Guy's got probably one of the brightest offensive minds in the country, heck of a recruiter, heck of a wide receivers coach, but nobody's beating down his door to be a head coach. And what did he get, 3 years? If I were a betting man, I would say Riley would be is going to be fairly selective and not do what Chad Morris did and jump on the first opportunity that came along. So I'm not putting much stock into Riley going to ECU for a couple of reasons. Who do I have between South Florence and Hartsville? I don't know enough about Hartsville to make an educated guess. I just haven't been able to keep up with the high school stuff the way I was able to last year. I'd feel a lot better about it if Hartsville was coming to South Florence. You know, that was it last year that they played such a good game? Might have been the year before last. Can't remember. I think it's going to be a good one though. It's kind of hard to judge exactly where South Florence is based off who they played in region play. They went out and played some of the best in our region play, and then once they started region play, there's just been no competition. And you go back to that game Friday night and look at the final score. It's 36-19, and it's kind of similar to Clemson's game against Virginia. It wasn't near that close. Started rolling like Amari Adams. He didn't even play the whole second half. Started rolling in a bunch of backups on defense, and Lower Richmond started having some success and made it closer than it really was. But to answer your question, again, I don't know enough about Hartsville to make a educated guess on that. Do I have recommendations on where to get a big boy haircut? That would depend on where you live. If you live around me, I might can put you on somebody. I can put you on somebody who gives me my big boy haircuts. Louisville 24 is like Louisville every year, back to the Petrino era. Defense has moments. They play well, but mostly average overall. Offense is where the focus needs to be. 100% agree with that. 100% agree. What's really going to piss us off is if we're ranked lower in the college football playoff. You know, you win out and you don't have to worry about it. Don't have to worry about it. If you win out, you do not have to worry about it. It's Adams 100%. Keating Love says he is, but you gonna have to. I don't know what you're asking me there. I don't even know who you're talking about, to be honest. Is Clemson looking to add any more D-line in the class? I think they're done. They got the 2 tackles and they got the end, and technically Davis was oversigned, so I think they're done on the defensive line. No, I didn't mention Zaire Patterson's name when talking about those guys, and I did mention it for a reason. He stays hurt all the time, and that's not his fault, but it's absolutely impacted his development. I don't remember if it was last year. I think it was last year. It might have been a year before last. I mean, he was a guy Dabo named by name as somebody that needed to totally buy in, that he wasn't fully bought in. And reading between the lines, I mean, he ain't putting the work in. Now he's grown, more mature, gotten older since then. Maybe that's changed. Maybe having Chris Rump there has a big impact on him. But until he shows he can stay healthy, and he's been dressed and out there the past couple of weeks, but he's missed a lot of games hurt this year, missed a lot of games hurt last year. He's just one of those guys that's had a lot of bad luck in the injury department. Just don't understand those hoping Venables doesn't do well and hope he comes back to Clemson. I like West, love Brent, but he wanted to be coach, and I get it. West to me has done good. I don't know that I've seen anybody wishing him to do bad. Maybe I just hadn't seen it, but it's not something that I've experienced. On the other side of that, I can understand why some in the fan base would want to see him come back if the opportunity presented itself. It just, he was the defensive coordinator for, the most successful stretch in program history, and those defenses were some of the best in the country, some years the best. So I understand all that. And there's always going to be those, that small faction of people, no matter what Clemson's defense does, they're not going to like Wes just simply because he's not Brent Venables. I think Wes has done fine. Is he Brent Venables? No, but heck, very few people are. And I also think there's a lot of people that assume if Brent gets fired, that automatically means he's coming back to Clemson. I don't know that that's the case. I don't know if I certainly wouldn't expect Dabo to fire West just so he can bring back Venables. I've had a couple people ask me about them being co-coordinators. Venables left Oklahoma because he didn't want to be a co-coordinator. So, I just, I understand why people will want Venables back. I just don't know how realistic it is if we're talking about the immediate future. I mean, AJ as an option, but could he be on the board? I figure Wilson and Brown might be higher. If he is, I'd imagine he's several spots down. I've got to watch AJ play a couple of times. To me, I like Will Wilson better. What I've seen on film of Bryce Baker and watching Baker work out at camp summer before last, I like him better. That's not a knock on Brand, but I think I just think there's a gap between him and some of those other guys. I mean, he's a dynamic athlete. I hadn't seen enough of him to know. Again, I've watched him play a couple of times. That's it. Hadn't really done a deep dive into his film or anything, but I don't know that he's. I don't want to say that because it's going to sound wrong. If he's on the board, I imagine it's closer toward the bottom than the top. Let's just say that. I'm from Hartsville, and I can say no one can stop our run game, so we will see what Amari can do. I will be willing to bet that Hartsville does the same thing that every other team I played South Florence does this year. Double team Amari and run it away from him. I see Riley waiting for a high-profile blue-chip job before he leaves, unless our offense tanks, and he thinks he needs to get what he can while he can. Yeah, I just see him being a guy that's going to be pretty selective when it comes to that, and he's not just going to take the first job that comes along. And I get it. He's got roots at ECU. There's a connection there. There's a tie there, but I just don't know that I see it again. ECU's not paying, ECU's paying their head coaches less than what he's making at Clemson as offensive coordinator. That'd be a step down salary wise, probably. What's up, Beef? Long time no see, brother. Could Isaiah Campbell come back to the class? I do not hold out hope for that. I can tell you Clemson's moved on. He looks to be Tennessee bound. We'll see. I just don't, Campbell was taken as a defensive end, or that's what he told me, defensive end. But I always thought he translated a tackle because he's already pushing the size of a defensive tackle as is. He's versatile enough to play both, but we'll see if they go after another defensive end, but I would not be counting on it. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to help you with this one, man. It's a little for my time. Please tell me I don't look that old, but I do not know why Clemson doesn't claim the 59 Sugar Bowl as a national championship appearance. That would be a better question for my colleague, Will Vandervoort. He is the history guru. He does a show right here, same channel, every Tuesday, 6 o'clock, I think it is. Shoot him that question. He can probably help you out with that. Who do I think will redshirt? It's starting to get to see. You're starting to be able to tell who's going to redshirt and who's not. Bettencourt is going to redshirt. Let's see who else here. Heaven Brown Schuler's going to redshirt, looks like. I can go through the list here right quick. Noah Dixon. Easy E, the running back. Corey Gibson. This print's little. I have trouble reading it. Most of the offensive linemen, except for Elijah Thurman, C.J. Cooper Taylor, Darian Mayo. Those would be the names right off the top of my head. One of those offensive linemen being Ronan O'Connell. Running out of names. That's probably about it. Yeah, Elijah Thurman's already played in 4 games. I doubt he's going to redshirt. Mason Wade's only playing 2. He's one of those offensive linemen. I think he's going to redshirt. Joe Wilkinson, he's only played in 1. Drew Woodaz has only played in 1. So those are the guys I think you can bank on probably redshirt. Here's another good point that I didn't even mention. ECU, the way we're headed and everything is gravitating towards the Power 2, Big Ten, SEC, everybody else being left out in the cold. That's another check in the cons department if you're making a pro and cons list for Garrett Riley to ECU. Exactly. Venables would not be without a job very long, which I didn't think Jeff Scott would either. But here we are. But I think those two dudes are cut from a different cloth. I think Venables is cut from a different cloth than most everybody. I would see him absolutely being right back in it. If Riley leaves, who do we hire at OC? Don't be surprised if it's not Kyle Richardson. Now, do not be shocked. He has been being groomed for that for a little while now. He was a very successful high school coach there at Northwestern before he came and joined Dabo's staff several years back, and was very proficient at running the air raid offense. So he's got a lot of similarities with Garrett Riley. I think that's part of the reason why they brought Riley in here. It's because he had so much in common with Kyle Richardson. They view him as a bright, shining star, in the future of college football. Has the whole Clemson to the SEC talk ceased? Or are we still pursuing it? Clemson is pursuing getting out, yeah. Whether it's the SEC or the Big Ten, I can't answer that. If you look at everything Clemson's done behind the scenes, screams Big Ten. Screams it. Look at the sports they've added. Look at the veterinary school they've opened and the stuff they've done to improve their academic standing. It just all that stuff screams Big Ten. But what all Clemson can do is make themselves attractive as possible to both, and whoever makes the offer, you jump on board. But you haven't heard anything about it because there's not been anything going on of late with the lawsuits. Not with the Clemson suit, anyways. I think there was something came out about Florida State's last week. Wasn't big news or anything, but that I still think that this is going to end up being settled. But the ACC is going to, it's not going to settle before the end of the year. It's not going to settle before it. If it's settled, probably the fastest it would be settled was sometime next year. Got to get to that February deadline that ESPN has of, either ending the television deal or extending it to 2036, which, up until Florida State filed their lawsuit, not many people knew that option was in there. Everybody thought it was just a normal look-in that they have every couple of years. But see, that's probably the next big date in this whole thing, to see what ESPN does. And I would lean towards thinking they're not going to cut ties with the ACC. They make too much money off of it because they don't pay. They get it as such a value, unless they just don't have any way to continue paying the money, which I don't believe that's the case. I think they'll exercise the option and the contract to run through 2036, like everybody thought it originally did. Can't believe Manny went for 2 points to let SMU win. I've been saying for weeks and will continue to say it. Pitt needs to beat SMU and stop the madness about ties. I'm probably going to be in the minority here, but I like the decision to go for it. The kicker was not having a good night. He had already missed a pretty, what was it, a 30-something yard field goal, 36 or whatever it was. And he had just had a field goal block, which I didn't think that was on him. I thought it was a heck of a play by the defensive lineman. He just timed it perfectly and jumped right over the offensive lineman and blocked it. But maybe he didn't think his kicker's head was in a good place. SMU did everything in their power to just give that game to Duke, and Duke just could not finish the deal. It was kind of frustrating to watch, because I'm like let SMU get beat and finish all this talk about the ties. But they got a pretty good quarterback there. He did not play his best game the other night, but he's been pretty good there so far this year for those guys. Here's your answer. 58, LSU was already named national champion when Clemson played them in the Sugar Bowl. It wasn't until 66 or so that the champion was determined after the bowl game. There you go. How many games has Tyler Brown played in? 4. He's played in 4 so far. Is Amari Adams legit? Is he one? I guess that's what you're asking me. Is he legit? Yeah, he's a monster, man. He's 6'6". He's already 300 pounds, and he can move. South Florence plays that 3-4, and they have it. They move him from one end to the other side. He probably would fit in better in a more traditional 4-3 and have him playing on the interior. But yeah, he's legit. The thing that he's going to have to work on when he gets to the next level is keeping that motor running at all times. He's a lot better at it with it than he was last year. And he keeps that motor running. He's a force, man. He is a force. I've watched him play 3 times this year. And, you just sit there and watch team after team double team, sometimes triple team him, and still run the opposite direction. Nobody wants to run at him. And when teams do decide to throw on us all quick passing game and stuff, yeah, he's legit. Clemson needs Pitt to beat SMU in case we were to lose to Pitt, or else the game at Pitt is a must-win to get sharp. I would say the other way. If you lose to Pitt, there's no guarantees you're getting in regardless. I would say you need Pitt to beat SMU, like you say here, because I saw you fixed it down here and say you meant to say SMU needs to beat Pitt. I would say you need Pitt to beat SMU and hang their first conference loss on them. And then Clemson to beat Pitt. Oh, you meant is he 100% committed? Yeah, I think he is. I talked to him about it Friday night. And I believe him. it's the time of year where there's always going to be a lot of smoke, especially with some of these 5-star guys, especially with a school like Clemson's already had 3 decommitments. And obviously there's been some with him. And, you never know sometimes the guy's not going to come out and publicly say, hey, no, I'm wavering. I'm thinking about decommitting. It's not going to happen. But I've been around Amari a little bit. I've talked to him a little bit for a good bit over the past couple of years. And I feel like I got a good read on his body language and his tone and the way he says things. And I got the distinct impression that he was tired of hearing about the decommitment stuff. Adamant that was all smoke, no fire, at least not on his end. And that a lot of it was manufactured on message boards, stuff like that. Our team's still coming after him? Absolutely. Are they going to stop? No. And it's the same thing with Clemson. They're going to take a run at some committed quarterbacks. And maybe even another position or two. We'll see. But yeah, can I sit here and tell you with 100% certainty that he's never wavered? No, I can't tell you that. Because I'd be willing to bet at least 1 or 2 schools has probably made him a better offer than what Clemson has. But I do think he sticks. Just not necessarily based on what he said, but it was the tone and how he said it and body language and those kind of things. I just got the distinct impression he was tired of hearing about it, that it was a non-starter. It was enough so that I told myself after I got finished talking with him, I wouldn't ask him about it no more. Because every time I see him, I always ask him about that, and I'm not going to ask him anymore. Has Cade's accuracy dropped in the past 2 games? He's had some throws he probably wish he could have back. That one that throw he tried to make the Brennan stool in the end zone, man, that was one of the worst passes I've ever seen. He overshot that thing by so far. And then the interception was a terrible decision. But I would just say that he's had some throws he probably wish he could have back. It's all about the mechanics, and if your mechanics are off a little here or a little there, it's going to affect the way you throw it. And I would just say I don't think it's anything to be overly concerned about. Here's the answer. LSU was already named national champion when Clemson played them in the Sugar Bowl. It wasn't until 1966 that the champion was determined after the bowl game. But I think your question was why Clemson doesn't claim one. Cade's game versus Virginia and Stanford were his lowest rated so far. Wake was one of his highest, so not dropping in the last 2 exact. Yeah, I don't think it's anything to get overly concerned about. There's different things that go on in each individual play that can make you rush a throw or throw one off your back foot or not get your feet set. There's just so many things that go into it. If it becomes a regular thing and we start seeing him overshoot guys by 10 yards over and over and over, and then we can have that discussion. All right, last one of the night. Besides NIL, what are the negative recruiting talk do schools use against Clemson? Well, okay. First and foremost, like you say here, there are a lot of schools out there that have more NIL money to throw around than Clemson does. Again, like I've said many times in the past. I'm not saying Clemson's broke or not well funded or anything like that. A lot of the NIL money they do have, Dabo likes to spend on retention. He's talked about it plenty of times. But once you start getting away from money, one of the bigger things right now is the questions about Clemson's future and where do they fit in. Are they going to be stuck in the ACC for the next decade and a half? And that, a lot of these guys, they want to go play at those schools where they're going to get the most exposure and not, the better TV time slots and against the better competition. So that's always one thing. There's some things that Dabo said in the past that's got twisted and taken out of context and turned into quotes that he didn't really say. And those kind of things get used against. I mean, you could just go on and on down the list. But I would guarantee you one of the things that gets used about against Clemson right now is I guarantee you there are schools out there right now telling recruits that Dabo might not even be the coach in 4 years because he'll end up walking away because he's frustrated with the way the landscape shifted. I guarantee you there are coaches out there saying that right now. Just the way, Dabo told Jackson Carman the same thing about Urban Meyer, and it came true 100%. I just told him he'd be out of coaching, not because he was getting, he just said he wasn't going to be the coach at Ohio State when his career was over. Turned out to be true, but there's all kinds of things that can be said. The deficiencies in Clemson's offense was something that was getting used against them a lot, which that was one thing coaches didn't really have to bring up because the players see it. But it was absolutely getting talked about, brought up. But those would be the biggest things right there. But these days, it's just everything's become, so centered around the money. Clemson has lost a lot of guys over the past 2 classes just due to the fact that other schools threw more money at them. I'm not saying that's why they, lost every recruiting battle or, that's why every guy flipped, although the guys that have flipped in this class, money was a big part of it. Don't think it was the only part of it for all of them, or at least one of them. But it is a big part of it now. And, Clemson's just got a much smaller alumni base compared to some of these other, bigger schools with bigger alumni. But compared to some of these other bigger schools that have much bigger alumni bases, Clemson's never going to be able to, match NIL money with a Texas A&M. Heck, Ole Miss has got throwing around a bunch of money. They got a lot of money to throw around. It's just the nature of the beast these days, and it kind of is what it is. Okay, not the last one. With points being a tiebreaker scenario, do you think Clemson should hold off pulling starters in these games? I don't think points is a tiebreaker. Hold on one second. I got them right here. Opponents' win percentage is like 3rd on the list. ACC opponents, since there wouldn't be, since they don't play each other. Yeah, in case of a 3-way tie, win percentage versus all common opponents when there's not common opponents. Here we go. Number 2, if all the tied teams are not common opponents, the tied team that defeated each of the other tied teams, okay, that wouldn't factor in. Win percentage versus common opponents. Oh. Okay, the final tiebreaker would be before you get to, all right, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tiebreakers here. You get all the way down to number 5. It is combined win percentage of conference opponents. It won't get past that one. But there's none that ties it to points scored. Number 6 is the highest ranking by the team rating score metric provided by Sports Source Analytics. Who knows what that means? And in number 7, the representatives shall be chosen by draw as administered by the commissioner. But it won't get past number 5, combined win percentage of conference opponents. That'll be the one that decides it if you get to a 3-way tie. Okay, doesn't go pro this year. Do you see Vizina maybe transferring? Yeah, we talked about this a bunch already. Maybe not tonight, but it's a distinct possibility. A lot of quarterbacks aren't willing to sit. It's a distinct possibility. A lot of quarterbacks are not willing to sit 3 years anymore. If you listen to Dabo talk the past couple of weeks, he seems pretty confident that both will be back next year. But, I kind of live by the motto, never say never. I absolutely think it would be a distinct possibility. And if that were to happen, K comes back, Vizina leaves, then you got quarterback problems for 2026 as we stand here right now today. And that one, we will make the last one. Appreciate everybody that tuned in. Of course, we'll be right back here next Monday talking about another Clemson win or maybe even a Clemson loss. Who knows? Whatever the outcome may be, we will talk about it. Clemson, Louisville, right here next Monday, 7 p.m. Appreciate everybody tuned in. Check us out, ClemsonInsider.com.